Hello.
Hey.
Hi. I am so excited to be here tonight with the two of you. Everybody, in whatever space that you are in, I hope that you give a warm round of applause to both Zeba Blay and Sesali Bowen, our authors of the evening. Congratulations to both of our authors on these new debut works of
Authoresses.
literature. We are so excited to have this conversation with you tonight. And in order to get started, I would love it if you would both grace us with a little bit of the words that we're going to be excited by in this book. Sesali, maybe we'll start with you. And then Zeba, if you'll just follow, and then we'll roll right into some conversation and keep this Black free and fabulous.
Okay. So I want to preface this just by saying my book is a book of essays. Essentially, every chapter is about something completely different theme. And they are titled either after songs or after popular Black kind of colloquialisms or sayings. And so this passage that I'm about to read now is from chapter 8, which was my, chapter on relationships and, kind of how I date and my dating practices. It's called Fuck These Niggas. And the passage is as follows. Frederick Douglass's first wife, Anna Murray Douglass, was a free Black woman when they met and married. Her status kept him inspired to pursue his own freedom, and Anna encouraged him. She took some sailor's clothing from her job so that he could have a disguise, gave him some of the money that she saved up, and sent him north so that he too could be relieved from the bondage of slavery. She joined him shortly after and helped set up their household when they settled in Massachusetts. She worked to support the family in their ongoing efforts to help other Black folks escape slavery. Fred's glow up as a free man continued as he became a preacher, a prominent abolitionist, and then best-selling author once he penned an autobiography. Suddenly, he was traveling the world and rubbing elbows with notable socialites and intellectuals of the time, leaving Anna behind at home. The rumors of Fred's infidelity started circulating not long after. He was suspected of having affairs with at least a couple of white women, one of whom would even live with him and Anna for a couple of months at a time. Despite the role that she played in him becoming a prominent figure in Black and American history, Anna is hardly mentioned in any of Fred's autobiographical works. A year after she died, this nigga Fred married Helen Pitts, a white woman who was their neighbor and his employee. When Harriet Tubman escaped from slavery in Dorchester County, Maryland in 1849, she was married to John Tubman, but she left him behind in her own pursuit of freedom. See, like Anna Murray Douglass, John was a free Black man. However, unlike Anna, John wasn't super supportive of his wife's plan to liberate herself. Clearly, Harriet didn't let that stop her from escaping to Philadelphia, nor did her husband's opinion stop her from making several trips back to their home state in order to free other enslaved family members. On one of those trips in 1851, she planned to find John and bring him back to Philadelphia with her. She even bought him a new suit for the journey. When she sent word to clue him in on her plan, he said no. That nigga John had married another woman named Caroline while Harriet was liberating their people. He said he was happy exactly where he was. The stories of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass are vital to Black history. They tell of our struggles, our resilience, and our victories. But a closer look at the love lives of our ancestors offers historical anecdotes that support another important underlying fact. When it comes to dating and relationships, these niggas ain't shit. Black women often receive the short end of the stick. It would be irresponsible for me to share any perspectives on romantic relationships and not make that clear up front. Thank you.
I just love it. I'm going to read a passage from my book from a chapter called Girlhood. I hope it's not too long. If it is, just stop me. Whenever I think about Black women and freedom, which is constantly, I think in images, particularly the images of us that have made indelible impressions on me and have stuck with me the longest. I conjure these images up easily. Angela Davis standing at a podium as she gives a speech in Madison Square Garden in 1972 in an effort to raise money for legal expenses. She's wearing a lavender blouse with big bell-shaped sleeves. Her afro is full and round, Light shines through it, resembling what could only ever be described as a halo. She is standing behind a three-sided bulletproof glass shield. A picture I first saw when I was 10 or 11 years old of Mamie Till Mobley, the mother of Emmett Till, standing over her only son's coffin with a look on her face that seems to vibrate with pain. Brooke Extravaganza in Paris is Burning, skipping down the beach in a bright yellow swimsuit as she declares, giggling to the camera, to the world, I am as free as the wind that is blowing out on this beach. Whitney Houston in a glaringly white tracksuit with red and blue accents, standing in the middle of Tampa Stadium in 1991, singing what is and perhaps always will be the most moving rendition of the American national anthem of all time. I think about how, period. I think about how she raises her fists in the air as she hits that final crescendoing note. A crowd of 73,813 fans burst into resounding applause. I see that last image, a vibrant snapshot in my mind, and then my thoughts begin racing forward to what this image means, the context that swirls around it. Like the fact that Robin Crawford, Whitney's confidant and lover, was standing just 12 yards away from her as she sang. These moments, these flickers of freedom, are always complicated and compromised by unseen forces and unheard stories. And perhaps that's what makes them so beautiful. When Whitney Houston sings the national anthem in that iconic video, she's not just a pop star singing the national anthem. She imbues the song with more meaning than anyone who isn't a Black woman could retain. She sang of the land of the free and the home of the brave, even as she grappled with the reality of having to hide parts of herself, of playing the role of America's sweetheart when she was beautifully, complicatedly, anything but. At least that's my interpretation. That's what these images mean to me.
Beautiful. Just really, I mean, the honesty and the acuity and just the use of language in both of your books is just, it's a real triumph. Like, bravo to both of you. But I have to say, like, I'm in such a lucky position because as the moderator of this event, the thing that brought me the most joy is watching you two react to hearing each other read, because you're such fans of each other. And so my first question is really about, it's not a question. It's just like, I want you to fangirl over your girl's book. I could frame it into a question, but it's like, okay, like if you were to try and pitch this to people, like what would you say about your girl's book? Like, and the reasons why you love it, people need to read it. Just jump in there. Like I see you, Zeba, like you're ready.
Oh yeah, I'm ready. I put me in place.
You're both ready, but I'm just like, I saw the head go in and it's like, you're about to say a sermon. Like, let's just go. Like
I have like Sesali, and I told you I was gonna get weepy. That's just my personality, please.
Same, I get it. Like,
but your fucking book, like this book, like wait, am I holding it right? Yeah, this book is, it's like on the one hand, I get to experience it as just like purely as a reader, as a Black woman, and get to see your perspective and your use of language and your insight and your intelligence and all of that as a reader. But then as a writer, the experience of reading your book was just so exhilarating. I couldn't put it down. It was so exhilarating. And I think part of the exhilaration was for me, the work that I do is always about reaching out and sort of like somehow forming a connection or being in conversation with Black women of the past, the women that I can't speak to, the Audre Lordes and the June Jordans who are no longer with us, but who mean so much. But there's something about knowing that my work is in conversation with you, and like in this moment, in this time, like your book is such a portrait of a specific time and a specific like it's just so that experience is very profound, because there are questions that I ask in my book that you answer, and it's just like it was just such a beautiful experience. And I think I'll stop gushing, but I think for me it's just like, I don't know what your experience was like shopping the book. You write about it a little bit in your book, but for me it was like so much of like, well, this exists and this exists, so why should Carefree Black girls exist? Mm-hmm. And to know that Bad Fat Black Girl and Carefree Black Girl exist in the same time,
yes,
is everything to me. So yeah, I just congratulations and thank you so much for your work. Yeah, that's all.
And that is so profound. I love that you said that, because I relate a lot of stuff back to female rap, because obviously I love female rap, but that is also the conversation that's happening in like the rap world, right? Where we're like, we don't have to ask, well, if we already have this and we already have that, then why do we need this other thing that you're bringing? Because like the truth is that there is not enough that has been said about Black girls, and there's not enough that can be said about Black girls. Like if they green light 100 more books tomorrow, it still wouldn't be enough. So I agree with that 100%. And I love that you said that there were questions that you raised in your book that you felt like my book answered, because one of the things that I felt like you did, there was a lot that I could not, or just was not ready to share in my book, particularly around the actual like toll that it takes on us, on our mental health, on our physical bodies, on just who we are as people, to exist at this intersectional identity of Black women. And for me, as a queer Black woman, where there is so much celebration, so much rah-rah, but there's also a lot of trauma and pain and violence that we are inflicting. And I think to read about to see you write so vulnerably about your struggles with mental health, I don't know, like I felt kind of like I was checked a little bit, because like I felt like that, I know for a fact that's something that I experienced, and I felt like I couldn't write about it, because I felt like if I wrote about like pain, then people wouldn't take seriously maybe the point that I was trying to make about our liberation, and why there was power in our liberation, and why there were things to learn from our liberation, because I didn't want people to think that like, well, it doesn't work, and like the bravery in that is really my favorite thing about your book, like your honesty to say that, to name that. I love that you also like connected those things to like real issues that happen to like Black people collectively, like we had to go to work after, when these police kill Black people, and we have to smile at white people who want to talk about it because it's the thing to talk about it, but don't have, an understanding of how that impacts us. I'll never forget the first weekend that I left Chicago. I didn't move away from Chicago until I was in my 20s. I got my first job after undergrad. And the week that I left, my cousin was shot and killed. And like, how do you bring that with you into work? Like, how do you start that conversation with coworkers? And so I love that you let that stuff make it to the page. I felt like you were a lot braver than me in a lot of ways. And that's what I loved about reading your book.
Oh my God. Oh, yes.
You can possibly
energy. Yes, you and me.
Yeah. Oh goodness, like that comparison of bravery, like that sharing of bravery, and for you to both get to exist in the same cultural moment of sharing those things, not only with each other, but sharing them with the world. I have another question to kind of piggyback off of that. And here's how I would like to structure it, like barring trauma, because we know that like there's a lot of work and healing that goes into being able to write that on the page and try to explain, just as both of you did in your descriptions of what you appreciate in each other's book, about the experience of being Black and the fact that we know that being Black comes with its own kind of social burden, because there's things that we have to deal with as people in this country, in the world, because of the ways that our culture has been exploited. But what I'd love to talk about is, like, barring the conversation of trauma and like the conversation of just hardship, what do you think was the scariest thing to sit down and write about when it came to your work? It's in the book now, so we go read it, but I'm just like, what was the passage where, like, you're putting this down and you're getting butterflies and you're getting nervous, but you worked past that to be brave and say, I'm going to put this out there because there's some woman out there, there's some person out there who's going to need to hear this and who's going to connect with it. So I'm going to work through it, and I'm going to do this. Like, what was, I know you both have that moment because I can see it in your faces, and I'm just curious, like, what was that moment for you?
It's a whole chapter for me. And it's definitely the chapter where I'm writing about my experiences as a sex worker. Because that was something that no one knew, like my homegirls knew, and my clients knew, but that was it. People did not know that really about me, that that was not, I would mention it vaguely because in the past 7 or 8 years in, like, the media space, there have been more narratives about, like, girls moonlighting as cam girls, and the conversation about sex work and OnlyFans. So I would just say, like, as a sex worker, but to actually sit down and kind of like name the specific kind of sex work that I'd done, to actually really tell that story honestly, more so about my family than anything, because I knew that that was something that would just, like, completely break them. Honestly, to this day, like, my granny is not allowed to read my book because of that. Like, she has explicit instructions, like, no, this is not, and I only let my mom read it because, I knew that she was closer to it. I was just more open to having that conversation with her. But that was definitely, like, the scariest part. But, my writing process is, I always have to write as if no one's ever going to see this, like, as if it's never going to see the light of day. I've always been like that. I think that is because that's how, I wrote for so long without anybody ever seeing it. And so, I didn't tell, and I didn't tell, like, my mom that I was putting that in the book before I put it in. I wrote it, I let it be written, I had got my edits back, I let it be done. And, like, when I had advanced copies, I made sure my mom got one first. And was like, all right, this is what I wrote and this is what I said.
Talk about bravery. I mean, you called Zeba brave, but, like, that's
I know.
really powerful, Sesali. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Family. I mean, bringing up family is bringing up things for me, because I feel like, for me, writing is all about honesty and about meeting yourself on the page as you are and accepting that and, going for it. But it's always complicated by knowing that, it's easy to write for someone you don't know, because they're just like a hypothetical person. But knowing that my mom would maybe read this, or like my, people in my family, because, also, like, my family was like, oh, we're gonna buy like 80 copies if you're putting like all that shit.
Like, don't, but just don't open them. Like,
I know. And I was like, and so for me, it was like, I definitely held back in certain aspects about, like, the things I wrote about my, my sexual abuse and all that kind of stuff, because I was afraid of the fallout, but that's also real, like, like that's just like a reality of, like, being a human and being a person. As much as my mom, like, is rooting for me and, like, wanting to see me get rich off of being a writer, she also, like, doesn't really understand the nuances of, like, what it is that I do. So that was definitely a struggle and something that I came up against. Also, the chapter I wrote on Cardi B was very challenging. I don't know why, like, I'm still thinking about it. I think part of it is just because she is such a polarizing figure, And I think it's very obvious if you read the book that I am a Cardi stan. So, you know, it was like trying to like be balanced because I'm writing about Nikki, and I, you know, just trying to write from a place that wasn't defensive, because I feel like defensive writing can be really like a lot, and I didn't want to do that. But yeah, so those were my two sort of like situations with the book.
That's very good. And I think this is a perfect place to talk about the conversations that you're both engendering in your work about pop culture. And what does it mean, you know, coming off of what you just said, Zeba, because it's really interesting to think about, but I'd love to talk about it a little bit more. You know, how do you start to write us into culture? Like, how do you start to write about our pop figures, about our, you know, our female rappers, about our conversation in a way that is still, you know, that still values critique, but also starts to understand the ways that we've been so misunderstood in all of these spaces. And now that we have this platform, like, what does it mean to you to write about these women and write about them differently and responsibly? Because it's showing up in both of your work. I mean, even if we just think about Sesali, your way of introducing us to, you know, Frederick Douglass, which might be slightly different than the way that we typically think of our, you know, our founding father. So yeah, like, talk a little bit about what it is to write into the culture, you know, and writing about these figures that people know but don't know.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, it's a struggle, especially as somebody who does focus on like female rappers, because I think female rappers get a hard time because they are pop culture and they make pop culture. But as is the case with just like, you know, trap music in general, it's not acknowledged as pop culture until, you know, until Megan Thee Stallion makes it on Tonight with Jimmy Fallon, until, you know, when there's like a whole years and years and years worth of history of like being real hot in the streets before that. So I think for me, that is really challenging. But I also think that I actually find it easier because people outside of like the creators of pop culture, so like the artists that we reference, like Black women just are pop culture. Like, we are it. Like, and it's almost one of those situations where you can't see, it's the opposite of not seeing a forest for the trees. Is you only see the forest and can't identify the trees, right? Because it's like, you know, we can talk about, you know, we can talk about a certain looks, we can use certain lingo, we can reference certain moments in pop culture, and usually in some way or another, they almost will always point back to a Black woman. Mm-hmm. And if we really look a little bit closer, it almost always points back to some kind of reference of like a Black woman from the hood. And so I think what I feel like what my work is to make the connections, to say, hey, what you're talking about is Black women here. You're not talking about, you know, pop
Billie Eilish
per se. Yeah, like, you know what I mean? Like, or yeah, we are talking about pop culture, but like, where do you, you know, it's like that girl who said like, when she was kind of called out for using like, you know, Black slang and like African American vernacular, and she said it was meme slang, or like, what did she say? It was like TikTok slang or something like that. She used some specific, she said it was like meme culture. Like, oh no, we've seen this reproduced in like the memes that we like so often. So now that's why we talk like that, as if memes aren't produced and distributed by human beings using technology as a tool. Like, technology does not create African American vernacular. Like, Black people using technology create that. So
it's such a disconnect. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that, because and the way that the internet metabolizes too, like Black pop cultural contributions, like from like it's the what for me, or not like the fact that like some like white girl is saying not the what, it's just for me, and I don't know if I'm answering your question exactly, Shayla, but like for me, it's just like all I can think about is, and I think also I think mostly in an American context because I grew up in America, but American pop culture, like when we say like American pop culture is Black culture, that's not just saying something, right? It's actually like the minstrel show is the basis of vaudeville. Vaudeville is the basis of popular music. Like literally, Black culture is American culture. American culture is about mimicking Black coolness. Like literally, that is what it is, and no one wants to talk about it. And so for me, writing this book, you know, and there's more work to do because I feel like I didn't accomplish everything that I wanted to do, but it's just like, can we acknowledge that? Like, can we talk about it? There's going to be no progress, no forward movement until we acknowledge the fact that Justin Bieber, why is Justin Bieber so famous? That is a famous person. That is a very
famous,
wealthy,
very famous,
person.
very wealthy.
Why is that? Look at his discography. Look at the way he like, and then think about, you know, that video that came out maybe 10 years when he was like 15, 14 of him using the N-word, right? Like, we don't want to talk about these nuances. And I feel like nuance is what pop culture is. And nuance is what makes pop culture so compelling. And so for me, when I was writing this book, like I was just trying to imbue as much nuance as I could in my analysis and in my perspective, because I think that specifically for Black women, we are often not allowed to be nuanced, complex human beings. You know, I don't know.
No, that was fantastic. Because yeah, nuance is definitely an answer to the question that I was asking about, like, how do you start to approach these things that people don't want to? And like, I do think that nuance is one of those things that when it comes to that capital C culture that Blackness is, it's something that we've perfected, you know, like articulation, nuance, the use of idiomatic language as a kind of musicality. Like these are all of the things that we brought that people don't want to give us respect for being the primogenitors of. And it definitely is something that both of you talk about in detail in your work. So if you have not already, it would be wonderful for you to pick up both of these books and read them in conversation. Speaking of the conversation, what I would love for you to do is the two of you revive the conversation we were having before the top of the hour, where, you know, going back to y'all fangirling out about specific passages in each other's books that you felt, even though you are coming out in the same cultural moment, there was some overlap in you writing these books. It wasn't expected that you would be in conversation the way that you necessarily are on the page. It wasn't intentional, but
there were so many moments where I was reading Zeba's book and I was like, wait, I wrote about that. Like it was literally like our books are legit. We always say this to each other, like just via DM, that our books are sisters, but they really are sisters. Like,
sisters.
Our books are Tia and Tamara Ing. Like
we're gonna do it, sister.
Yes.
This is a book commercial right here. Just sister. Yeah. They high five, like they hand clap, they turn around and they're back to back. You know, just trying to sell. Just, you know, buy these books. Anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I actually have a passage that I want to read, because there's a passage in my book. It's actually, I believe, in the introduction of my book, where I say, you know, Black women are American pop culture. So many of the trends and the cool things that we all gravitate to were first introduced by or popularized by Black women. And reading Sesali's book was such a gift, because I said earlier, you know, there were questions I asked that she answered, and there was just like this interesting like echo. It was just like such a cool reading experience. Like it was like really cool. But one passage that I really liked was in the epilogue actually, and I'll read it right now because I feel like it 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 checked something that I did in my book. So she writes, people try to erase ratchet Black girls at every turn, but we are not siloed and our impact is undeniable. In the same way that hip hop is consumed by diverse audiences all over the world, so are the trends that are set by ghetto ass Black girls. Our style, our language, and our beauty resonate with people across different backgrounds. Just look at all the white influencers who are making millions by appropriating Black culture or flat out Blackfishing. Everyone wants a fat ass and a colorful weave, yeah? It's not a coincidence that the editor who ended up being the most excited about the potential of this book is a white woman. God bless you, Hillary. People are obsessed with hood bitches, whether we care to admit it or not. And I just wanted to like give that passage a spotlight because I think it's so easy. Like, again, like when we talk about nuance, it's so easy to flatten, right, Black women into one thing. And that was what was so exciting about my experience of reading your book, Sesali. It was like, okay, like I am a Black girl in America, but I was born in Ghana. Right? I have an immigrant experience. I have a very different experience. And so for me to, there are certain things that I can acknowledge and exalt, but that I cannot claim necessarily for myself. And I think that distinction of like, no, it's hood Black girls who have set these particular trends that is important, because I feel like that is one of the, when we talk about nuance, that is one of the things that gets flattened. And so I so appreciated that specificity and distinction, you know.
Absolutely.
I feel like it's so, that's like the purpose of my writing and a lot of my work, obviously. And I think I just want to say that, like, and it's not just about the credit for me. It's not just about like, oh, because we need to show like who originated this.
Mm-hmm.
It's that it's actually the Black women who are most likely to die that we are. That's why it's meaningful, because when we talk about the Black women that we're lifting this stuff from, we're talking about Black trans women. We're talking about, Black women who, get assistance, Black women who have been to jail, Black women who have open cases, Black women who never finished high school, Black women who do hair in their kitchens. Like, we are talking about the Black women who are most likely to experience intimate partner violence. And those are the people whose stories and vibes and looks we lift from and create empires with, and like, and then like try to erase their very existence, because then we would have to figure out ways to support them because we're always taking their shit. And like, I think that is so, sometimes I'm like, did I really get that point across? Did I get that point? Was I able to say that? Like, does that make sense? Because I need people to understand that, like, we cannot just say people like Breonna Taylor's name in death anymore. We have to start uplifting girls like that in life. Yeah. Like, we have to start loving them and appreciating them in life. And like, that's why I also like, I named some of the Black women that I really love, like Issa Rae and Elaine Welteroth, these very successful, smart, brilliant Black women who are often put in front of us as an example of like, hey, see, look, we're giving Black girls credit because look, we got these Black girls right here that are like creating content and doing this stuff. And it's like, but that's great for them. But those are also not the Black girls that we're talking about. Yeah. Those are not them, And I think I had a because I came from that experience, like that has always felt like my responsibility. So I said all that to say it means a lot that that's the passage that you pulled out, because I do think that sometimes like that's the scariest part of writing about Black women, because I'm writing about a specific subset of Black women, and that should be making other Black girls uncomfortable. Like the Black girls who have assimilated, who are more, you know, who don't have like a hood experience. Like a lot of times they don't want to acknowledge, you know, that part of it. So that just means so much to me, and I really need to say that.
And
I just want to say, speaking to that assimilation, Cecily, I'd love it if you talked a little bit about that passage in Zeba's book where she's dressed bad as all get out, you know, and like tell us a little bit about how like that inspired you and like
and that's, it's a perfect segue, because you know, it's about kind of like the messiness of the Black experience, if you will. So I'm unfortunately I'm not home right now. I'm in a hotel room in Miami, so I don't have Zeba's book with me. But there's this one particular part where she's talking about, it's really hot, it's the summertime, but she's still like really covered up because she's, you know, trying to like figure things out about her body, and it's really honestly struggling with trauma, and is holding a lot of that in her body. And she's all covered up, not dressed weather appropriate at all, like long sleeves, tights. And somebody yells, a man, not minding his business like he should be, of course, yells across the street, "Bitch, ain't you hot?" And it's this heartbreaking moment that like ruins Zeba in the moment. And I recognize that, and she writes so beautifully and vulnerably about like how she felt in that moment. But it's also like hilarious because that's also just Black people to like ruin you with the funniest thing that you've ever heard out of, you know, out of someone's mouth.
It's
and
like, how can you be mad?
yeah. And it's like, damn, like way to open up all these rooms. But I think that that really is the complexity of existing as a Black woman, to be in community with Black people, but to also have this experience of womanhood that is also distinctly Black. And like, that's the dance that we're always doing, of re-experiencing or reliving some of the worst moments of our lives, sometimes through something so nonsensical or funny, you know. I think a lot of people say that like trap music is like mumble rap, and that it, you know, it doesn't mean anything, but like
means everything.
it means everything for that reason. It's the nonsense of it that is the brilliance, that is the creators. And so I felt like that
vein of everything, because I you know, at my responsibility as the moderators, make sure y'all get to your audience and they have questions to ask.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem. It's just, I mean, I'm delighted. I'm having a great time, but I just want to make sure that I wanted to ask you one last thing before we cede the floor and Center for Fiction ask questions from your audience. What is next for you? Like when it comes, you two do everything, and you've, you know, spent so much time in this book representing a good swath of everyone in a lot of ways. So I'm just curious, like, what is the next big thing, or where can we follow you next when it comes to the work that you're doing?
Cecily?
So I do think that I have a next big thing that I unfortunately cannot announce yet, because essentially we're just about to take the proposal out the door. So we don't have a deal yet.
Yeah.
But I will just say that it technically won't be my project. It'll be a project that I'm helping someone else execute for themselves. But
it's iconic. It's iconic.
It's iconic, and it's my actual dream job. And so, you know, when y'all hear about it, because I know it's gonna happen, y'all will be like, I'm not at all surprised. I'm also really excited that my podcast, Purse First, is coming back. Podcast about female and queer rappers. And, you know, I am also looking forward to more people buying my book, so I can, you know, hopefully, I don't know, pay off some student loans.
Bad I shouldn't have even tried. Bad Fat Black Girl by Sesali Bowen, out in stores. Real quick before,
me, I'm definitely buy my book. I'm writing a novel, which is exciting because I feel like I'm getting to explore some of the themes that I explored in these nonfiction essays in a different way, and that's really exciting. Follow my newsletter. It's a Carefree Black Girl on Substack. And yeah, I'm just like, I just want to continue telling stories about Black women with nuance. That's it.
And the book is Carefree Black Girls by Zeba Blay. And so now I'll let the Center for Fiction join us so that we can ask some more of your questions. This has been a delightful conversation, y'all. Like, thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. So I have a few questions from the audience from the Q&A. Asha, she asks, how do you deal with the idea that the success of books for and by Black women may require others to overhear the conversations we may be trying to have with our own we? In selling the book, did you have to defend the value of your insights to non-Black women and girls?
Leave it to Asha, because I know who this is. It's so funny because this person, Asha, is actually one of my favorite writers. Leave it to Asha to ask a question like this. That is so heavy. But I will say, no, because I think the thing is that the others are always late to the party. So I never feel like a way about what they're overhearing because I don't ever trust them one to make the proper meanings of it. I feel like a lot of times I could be speaking a different language, but I also don't write for other audiences, to be honest. Like obviously, like anybody can read my book. Everybody should read book, learn. But I write for and two, I'm writing to Black girls all the time. And that's on period. So that's just not something I really do worry about, actually, to be honest. And no, and I did not have to defend the value of my insights, but I did hear the pushback from surprisingly another Black woman about my value and insights on Black women, which I write about in my book.
Yeah, and I really appreciated you writing about that, like incorporating the experience of actually having to like shop this work and like get this work out into the world, because that's a whole other, that could be a book in and of itself. But yeah, for me, it was very interesting. It's like, when you work with like a bigger publisher too, it's like, there's so many compromises that like you didn't even know you had to make until you're making them. My goal was always to write for Black women, but it's interesting to have that goal within a system that doesn't necessarily care about Black women, that wouldn't even necessarily like, bought my book for like far less than what I think it, no shade, love them, but for far less than what it's worth. Like, let's call a thing a thing,
Pop your shit.
Right. Yeah. Like, let's call a thing a thing. That was very interesting because it was for the first time I was seeing the matrix laid out for me. I was seeing the fuckery. And that's the point in your journey as a writer, that you take in the information and you go, oh, okay, I see this for next time, and but like Sesali, it's like the goal always is to, whoever can read it will read it, but I'm writing for Black women, period.
Beautiful. I have 3 more questions for you guys. So I have another question from the Q&A from Zakia. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. How do you maintain sanity when it comes to the commodification of Black culture? How do you not allow it to get you down?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think that people who commodify Black culture are always late. Usually by the time we get it, we are already on to something else and or doing it in a different way, and or they're not doing it like us anyway. We can definitely talk about like how the resources are not distributed correctly, but in terms of like my personal sanity, like I don't struggle to maintain it because it's like you're late. Like
everything she just said.
All right, well, that one's answered. So from JT, what do you hope your books, City Girl, what do you hope your books will do for their readers?
My book, I've thought a lot about that since it came out. And I think, you know, I did the thing you're not supposed to do, which is looking at Goodreads reviews, but it's actually very enlightening. You know, it was enlightening because like there were some reviews that were like, oh, like this book is actually really depressing. And I found that really like interesting and like actually like that's what I want, because I think that there's an expectation for Black women to perform something for you. And so you see the words carefree Black girl and you're expecting something from that. And my book, I'm hoping, is a way to remind people that there is no joy without pain, and that the pain of Black women should be acknowledged and given space to exist. And if it makes you uncomfortable, then you should like, you know, you should interrogate why that makes you uncomfortable. So for me, ultimately, like I hope this book allows anyone who's going through similar struggles with depression or anxiety to see themselves and to know that it is okay to acknowledge that part of themselves, even as they try to reach for joy and for care freedom, you know?
Sorry, I realized I was on mute.
Okay.
I think for me, I hope that my book gives people the space to reconsider their thoughts about like actually like seeing hood Black girls in the wild. You know what I mean? Like the ways in which we actually like engage with those folks, what we think they deserve, what we think that they can accomplish, what we think they can do, who we think that they can be. And I also hope that, you know, for the hood Black girls that pick it up, I hope that they feel like they're seen and that they deserve everything as well. Like there's a line where I say like those girls deserve the same amount of love and respect that we give Beyonce and Michelle Obama. And when I say I meant that from the bottom of my heart, I really do. So yeah.
Lovely. I have another question from someone in the chat. Shireen, she writes, I have a question for both authors. How does this writing help you and your community cope with the generational trauma and the daily aggressions that you have to navigate? Does the pain heal a little when you begin to express yourself about taboo subjects? I think you're muted.
Okay, I'm reading it over again.
Yeah, I'm reading it over again too. That's what I was trying to say. I'm reading it.
How does this writing help you and your community cope with this generational trauma and the daily aggressions you have to navigate? So I'll answer the first part. How does it help me? It helps me because it's very confronting. And I'm the kind of person who does not want to confront anything. Like I just want to be like, woo, like you chilling because I'm a Taurus. Writing this book was very confronting because it's like you can't write about joy without acknowledging the fact that you don't feel joyful. And then from there, you have to acknowledge the fact, you have to acknowledge why you don't feel joyful. And so a lot of things came up for me in writing this book in terms of like who I come from and the lineage. Like I learned while I was writing this book that three people in my family have trigger warning committed suicide, and I didn't know that, you know, and I wish I had known that because I feel like that's pertinent information for me. And so that was very revealing. And so in turn, how that helps my community, again, I just feel like being honest and open and vulnerable for myself first mirrors for someone the act of being honest and vulnerable for themselves. So
I think it just helps me. It documents it. I am a forgetter. I'm an intentional forgetter. This was really for me like the book that I needed to read when I was in my late teens and early in 20s. And so I think it's just important for me to like have this as a point of reference for not only where I was, but I also think this just helps the canon of like Black girlhood. I think that it adds nuance to the already expansive literature that exists on Black feminism. I think that trap feminism is a very important part of that conversation. Like I stand on that, which is why I introduced it academically first before I even wrote this book. And so yeah, I think it helps because we've added something important to the archive. Yeah.
Great. So I'll take our last question. I saw one in the chat. There's a Q&A from Mariah. She asks, what advice do you have for someone who's interested in writing a book but is scared to do so?
Then don't write it. Decide that you're not going to write it and see what happens. See how that feels when you decide, okay, actually, like I'm too scared to write this, so I'm not going to do it. What you're going to find is that you're still called back to those words. Those concepts are still going to be calling back to you. And literally, when you just write from that perspective of, well, I'm not writing a book because I'm too scared to do that, but I am kind of like getting off these concepts and thoughts that are still coming to me, you would be surprised at just what takes shape. And also, again, I'll just say, I'll write like nobody's ever going to see it. So if you're scared to write a book, I'm assuming that you're not scared to write the book. What I'm assuming is that you're scared for someone to read the book. But that's only the second half of the battle. Like you write the book for you. Like write the book as if no one else is ever going to see it. And then the conversation we'll be having is, what advice do you have for someone who has written a book but is scared to let someone see it? And that is a different conversation, because then it's like, girl, you just spent all this time writing this book. Let a friend see it at least. So that's my advice.
yeah, I completely agree. I think that you need to first write for yourself. That is the biggest lesson I learned with working on this collection of essays. Write for yourself first. Don't think about Twitter. Don't think about yourself first. And then when you're done, you can step away and think. But also, I think you should probably sit with what you're afraid of. You know, what is it that you're scared of? Are you afraid of judgment? Are you afraid of rejection? Are you afraid that you don't have anything to say? I feel like, you know, for me, a big part of my writing process was acknowledging my fear and specifying my fear. Because you know, fear can put a fire under your ass, but you can't write afraid. You have to write from a place of full acceptance. So yeah, start there.
I actually had one question myself. This is going to be the last question. But this is me asking you guys. In recent times, it's as if Black women are constantly needing to stop and educate white peers about appropriation, culture, etc. Do you think that it's our responsibility to constantly be the teachers or keepers of our culture for their ignorance?
No, and I say that because, one, I don't believe as much in that ignorance as other people do. They know what the fuck is going on and what the fuck they're doing, and they are intentionally doing that shit. And that's why it's not our job, because we don't actually need to educate them.
They
know
fucking know.
There is no ignorance. We don't need to teach them that, because we just don't need to, because they know and they're choosing. There's an abundance of information. There's an abundance of access. There's an abundance of, and there's an abundance of fucking entitlement from them in the first place. So no, we don't need to teach them anything. period.
Thank you. Yeah, everything she just said, fuck that shit. Like, you know that the internet exists now. We're not in 1895. Like, you can.
Somebody on the internet said, Google it. Somebody in the chat said, Google it. Exactly. Google it. Because it ain't going to be me, child. The people at Google make way more money than I am.
Right. Thank you. That's all the questions that I have for the night.
Of course. Thank y'all so much. This was so much fun.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you
Cecily,
both.
I'm about to DM you.
Yes, DM me. We got to chat after this. Thank y'all so much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Everybody rush to buy the books. The links are in the chat. And Sesali and Zeba, next time you're in Brooklyn, stop by, sign some books here. We'd love to see you anytime. And hopefully we'll welcome you to our stage for your next books. All right. Thanks a lot.
100%. Thank you.